The Summit line originally was on our property. It went through the east side of our property, south to north. We said we would never sign an easement for this project, ever. And we've resisted landowners, we've resisted survey people that want to come on our property. So they moved it about 60 feet across the fence line from our property, which really doesn't make any change in the project for us whatsoever. And in that process, I had pre-filed testimony and prepared to testify at the trial or the hearing in Fort Dodge. Now that the pipeline is not on my property, the IUC said, you will not be allowed to testify. So my voice has not been heard at the hearing on the record. It puts my farm, my animals, my pond in jeopardy, my home, my grandchildren, possibly.
And you have no say.
I have no say. But Bruce Drastetter, who technically owns Southern Carbon Solutions, has contributed thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to the governor, various legislators through the years, and so they will do his bidding. So where are the people standing up for our rights? Where are the people that are doing the right thing? They're looking out for themselves. Their job there is to represent their constituents, to protect their people, and they're not doing it. People who don't know about the pipeline, it always amazes me that there are so many people that don't know about the pipeline that are indirectly affected by it, but they'll go, the pipeline's underground, you won't see it. And I go, well, you don't see a sniper either. I mean, this is a lethal structure.
Right.
A gas line runs at 700 pounds of pressure. This pipeline runs at 2,100 pounds of pressure. So there's no leak involved with it. It's a catastrophic rupture.
Why can't you just lay the pipeline and then farm over it?
Well, that's what Summit says. We'll put the pipeline in 4 feet undercover and you can farm over it. The problem is that you don't own that property anymore. They have complete control of that easement. Another problem with that is that the liability issue with that. Summit says they will hold us indemnified from any damage. But the problem is they will want to say that you caused the damage. One issue in Iowa we have is frost heave because of the winter. The earth doesn't want that pipeline in the ground. It wants to get rid of it. It's not natural. So with the freezing and thawing, the pipeline will eventually come closer to the surface. So if you're driving a heavy grain cart over that pipeline and the pipeline ruptures, or if it's wet and the tractor sinks into that easement and sinks onto the pipeline and breaks it, they're going to say that you caused the damage to the pipeline, that you caused the loss of life, that you caused the killing of the livestock. You can go to court and fight it, but what farmer has the resources and the money to stand up to a Summit Carbon Solutions? You'd lose your property and your farm and your livelihood. Once you construct the pipeline, when you put all the building and construction and the digging and the equipment and the power to transport it and that takes to get the stuff up to North Dakota, you're going to have a negative effect. It'll be a net negative effect on the environment. And one of our researchers put forth a paper. There are two kinds of CO2. There's biogenic CO2, which is part of the natural plant cycle, which is net zero. There's anthropogenic CO2, which comes from manufacturing smokestacks, vehicles, that type of thing. That's very difficult to capture because it's expensive. You have to sort it out of the air. The CO2 that comes out of the processing from the ethanol is pretty much a pure stream of CO2. But the problem is the EPA tracks anthropogenic CO2, but not biogenic CO2 because it's net zero. So the pipeline will not reduce the CO2 according to the EPA by 1 iota. You could put a smell, an odorant in the pipeline to warn people that there's been an explosion.
But they said they don't want to.
Well, but see, the thing of it is it's irrelevant because once you smell the odorant, it's too late. You can put an alarm up, fine. You can hear the alarm, but when you're oxygen deprived, you can't think straight. You can't figure out what's wrong. You can't figure out how to, you know there's a problem, but you can't figure out how to get yourself out of it. And you might figure out, I should go to my car and drive away, but the car won't run either. So either way, you'll be overcome by the toxic fumes. So if you have a contaminant in the line, that will probably react with the CO2. And when you have a reaction with the CO2, that will eat the pipe. Like if they have a water element in there, water and CO2 combine to make carbonic acid, and that will eat into the pipe. So if you get a little hole in the pipe, that doesn't create a leak, that creates a ripping explosion. And PHMSA, they have some jurisdiction over the pipe because, like it was explained to us, it's an interstate pipeline. So you have to have some consistency in construction. You can't have one state say, well, we want plastic, another state says, well, we want cardboard, and another state says, we want steel. You can't have that. And that's the jurisdiction they have. They have over the construction, the safety of the people that are laying the pipeline, and that sort of thing. PHMSA has written a letter to the IUB and to our county supervisors that says, this is our area that we have jurisdiction. We don't have jurisdiction over local ordinances, and that's one thing that Summit is fighting. They don't want local ordinances to govern their pipeline. But if you don't have the federal government protecting you, and you don't have your state protecting you, you've got to rely on your local officials to protect your property and your livelihood. My family has a century farm. My great-grandfather had bought it from railroad rights, and then my great-grandfather gave a farm to each of his 5 sons, and then so my grandfather farmed our farm, and then my dad, and now me. He called me one day and he said, you know, I've got this weird paperwork in the mail. Can you come up and look at it? Sure, Dad, I can look at it. And it was the notification from Summit Carbon Solutions for the informational meeting. So I read through it, and I read through the prospectus, what they plan to do, and I went, they want to do what? It just sounded so idiotic, unnecessary, and ridiculous. I couldn't believe somebody was actually going to try to do that. So we went to the informational meeting, and at that point, you know, like from August to September, you don't really have the information, the bank of knowledge that we have now. But one question we asked was, okay, you're going to sequester 18 million tons of CO2, and you're going to get paid $85 a ton for taxpayer money. That math stirred up the group. Greenhouses pump carbon dioxide into their greenhouses so the plants grow better. And actually, this time of year, when all the crops are growing, we're in a CO2 deficit. So,
what's ideal? What would be ideal?
Well, it occurs 0.04 naturally in nature. At 10% concentration of CO2, it's fatal. So it doesn't take much. And that's one thing that Summit has not released, is the dispersion modeling for the CO2 in case there would be a rupture. A lot of it depends on the topography, the wind direction, temperature, that type of thing. So they could do a worst case scenario and let us know, because how are the EMS people supposed to respond to something that they know nothing about? And plus, if they released it, people would know exactly how bad it is. And part of the criteria they have to meet is the emergency equipment phase. They're supposed to provide EMS groups with grants. But when a contained breathing apparatus costs $9,000 a piece, what kind of money is it going to take to equip all these people with that equipment?
Wow.
Well, and that's the one thing, they're jeopardizing a lot of the water sources. They want an additional, and the ethanol plants take now 36.6 billion gallons of water a year to produce ethanol. So when they collect the CO2 from the fermentation process, they compress it into the critical liquid, because that's between a liquid and a gas. That equipment creates heat, and they need to cool that equipment. They want an additional 3.6 billion gallons of water to cool the equipment. So there are two water sources: alluvial sources that's replenished by rainwater and that type of thing, and those are replenished fairly quickly. We have the deep water aquifers, the Jordan Aquifer, for example. The ethanol industry gets 90% of their water from the deep water sources that takes centuries to replace. You know, and the water issues are one part of it. There are many, many issues and facets of this project that it's generated. There's the water, there's the politics, there's the safety, there's the land restoration. All of that figures into the total picture. And when you look at the cons in the total picture and the pros in the total picture, the only thing you can see on the pro side is collecting billions of dollars of our taxpayer money from the federal government. If that 45Q tax credit was not there, this project would not happen. In certain instances, it's drawn neighbors together. Some people have signed and it's drawn neighbors apart, which is not the silver lining. But I've met people all over the state, in other states, in 5-state area. I know people that I've never met in South Dakota. Some of that's due to technology, Zoom, but you know, they're just your next door neighbors now. So yeah, you just have met all kinds of new friends, and we meet at meetings, and we meet on Zoom, and yeah, and we exchange ideas back and forth. And we are kind of ground zero for this. If this pipeline goes through, there are 90,000 miles of CO2 pipeline planned for the United States. So if it goes through here, they're coming for you.